Hi everyone, it's LadyJenevia. I'm back. I'm filming new videos since I finished posting everything related to New York Comic Con, as well as all of the videos that I had filmed before I left. If you wanted to hear more specific highlights related to that event, then I would recommend that you follow me on Twitter and Instagram. In particular, Instagram has been the platform on which I've been posting some photos as well as some interview highlights, so if you didn't feel like going through all of the longer videos that I posted from the convention, then that would be the way to know about some of the things that I did while I was there. Today's video is going to be about Daredevil Season 3, which is now available for streaming on Netflix. If you don't want to be spoiled, I recommend that you click away and come back after you finish all of the episodes. Matt Murdock returns from the dead, so to speak, as he was never actually dead but merely believed to be so by all of the people in his life, except for the religious figures that hide him and nurse him back to health. Charlie Cox portrayed Matt Murdock's disillusionment and the difficult journey back to his heroism beautifully. Getting to see him be so broken and vulnerable was truly a gift. The writing was also brilliant for both villains Wilson Fisk, aka Kingpin, and Dex Poindexter, aka Bullseye. What's great about the evolution of Kingpin as a villain is that this time around he gets to directly interact with more of the characters. In Season 1, where he was also the main villain mastermind, there was very little direct interaction with Matt Murdock. His propensity for manipulation is also put at the forefront by way of his interaction with Bullseye, whom we'll be calling Dex in this video since that's how many of the other characters refer to him. I really didn't know what to expect with this character since the Colin Farrell version from back in 2003 was more of a delightfully camp interpretation, also very Irish.
More peanuts, please.
Dex's origin story was particularly fascinating as it was strongly rooted in matters regarding mental disorders, but with a more clinical analysis. From borderline personality disorder to his psychopathic tendencies, these are not terms that the show throws around lightly. There was a more studious approach to incorporating the symptoms of these conditions and their associated behaviors. There was also a beautifully tragic quality to Dex's story, as you see him try his best to manage his conditions so as to be able to live a functional life without all the disruption that succumbing to his impulses would undoubtedly create. Wilson Benthal's performance was incredibly nuanced, and it would be great to see him be offered more prominent roles in other projects so he can continue to showcase what he's capable of as an actor. The season leaves things open for both of these villains to return, and in particular I would like to see Dex return as a fully formed Bullseye that is acting on his own impulses. It would be a fascinating evolution moving forward from the position of someone who had Kingpin manipulating and pulling his strings. Karen and Foggy are also the best they've been across the 3 seasons of Daredevil. They've grown and evolved from the show's beginning. There's an exploration of their backstories in regards to their families, and they've really gained a lot of agency as their characters have become more secure and confident in themselves. Having laid on all this praise though, which I'm sure many other reviewers across print and video platforms have already covered, there's just one major question I have now about Season 3 of Daredevil. Where the bloody hell was Frank Kastle? Now listen, I am well aware of the fact that the show is called Daredevil and therefore the story will first and foremost be about Matt Murdock. Now having said that, I would like to remind people that of all the shows that exist within this shared universe, particular to the Netflix Marvel shows, the stories on the show The Punisher are most closely intertwined with the stories from Daredevil. Frank Castle's debut was in Season 2 of Daredevil, and the impact of his character and Jon Bernthal's performance was what led to him getting his own spin-off series. However, the tangible chemistry between Frank Kastle and Karen Page was what led to Punisher showrunner Stephen Lightfoot to insist that Karen Page both appear and play a significant role in Frank Castle's story in his own show. Frank and Karen's chemistry had an electricity that Karen and Matt never did when the writers were delusional enough to try to push them towards one another in a romantic capacity. I'll address 2 main parts regarding why Frank Kastle being absent in Daredevil Season 3 is so strange. The first is his connection to Wilson Fisk, and the second is his connection to Karen Page. In Season 2 of Daredevil, Frank encounters Fisk in prison. In the opening of their conversation, Fisk attempts to offer condolences for the loss of Frank's family, and Frank shuts this down.
What happened to your family that day?
Don't you do that. You don't talk about my family, you got that? Just don't do it.
Frank is no fool, and he's nobody's puppet. He is not fooled by Fisk's attempts to manipulate him because he understands how people work in a way that Dex does not. The only reason why he's willing to take out the man Fisk wanted him to go after is because it served his own interests. He's not afraid of Fisk in the slightest. He called him a has-been to his face.
Well, I don't help. Bag has been my boss's.
Has been.
You heard what I said.
Another important aspect to remember about this exchange is that after Frank took out Dutton, Fisk betrayed him and left him to be taken out by Dutton's syndicates.
Mr. Kastle, thank you. I couldn't have done it without you.
But Frank does what Frank does and single-handedly took out an entire cell block. Fisk is impressed, so he arranges for Frank to escape the prison. It's consistent with the tactics and rhetoric Fisk would go on to employ on Dex, but again, Frank is of a different stock. He knows exactly why Fisk is willing to let him go. He never goes along with what Fisk wants unless it just so happens to be what he wants for himself, and he always deduces what Fisk's true motivations are.
You want me on the outside, so I step on every piece of shit I see. That way nobody gets strong, and city's yours for the taking.
And what about the most important piece of what could have and should have been foreshadowing dialogue between these two characters to tie into season 3?
Next time I see you, only one of us walks away.
Yes, of course.
Now that we've established that these two have their own loaded history, let's talk about Kastle. No, not Frank Kastle. I'm talking about Kastle, spelled with a K. The pairing in the Marvel Netflix universe that has set the internet on fire. If you're someone with the word Kastle with a K in your social media username, description text, profile photo, or banner, I do not expect to have to refresh you of these events, but for those who do need a refresher, let's address the ways that these two have demonstrated a connection that is so powerful that to not have it come into play in Daredevil Season 3 is completely nonsensical. When Frank becomes acquainted with Team Nelson and Murdock, the lawyer team willing to defend him, Matt and Foggy look at Frank for what he's done, whereas Karen sees him for who he is. In their hospital conversation, he goes from calling her lady to ma'am when she helps him to remember who he was before he spiraled into rage, darkness, and despair.
Point is, you were safe, okay? I wanted you to know that.
Guess I'm just supposed to take your word on that.
Classy. Nothing to do with my word, lady. Thank you, ma'am.
What?
Help me remember.
He also later saves her after escaping from prison, tackling her to the ground in the process, bodies all pressed up against each other because he's being her own human shield. But okay, perhaps some viewers were naively unconvinced of their connection by the time season 2 was finished, so let's just jump ahead to where things kick into high gear. Frank and Karen on season 1 of The Punisher. Now in this season, the two people Frank collaborates with the most are Micro, aka David Lieberman, and Karen Page. The only reason why Frank and Lieberman work together is because Lieberman tracked him down and injected himself into Frank's life. Frank was already more than willing to work with Karen.
It's really good to see you.
It's good to see you.
In episode 2, Frank tracks Karen down to ask for her help finding out more about Micro, but the subtext would also have us believe that there is a seriously intense emotional connection between these two.
Hey.
No one can look at this and be fooled into thinking these two are platonic.
Okay.
Okay.
When am I gonna see you?
You want to?
I didn't mean you're still alive.
In episode 5, Karen and Frank have an emotional exchange where Karen shares that she wants Frank to think about there being an after, as in a return to living a full and somewhat functional life following the completion of his vengeance quest.
So what do you want, Karen? What should I do? Should I let it go?
No, but I want there to be an after. For you.
Conversely, Frank is alarmed because he's worried about being able to go after the people that killed his family while also making sure that Karen is safe.
I can't go after these men and keep you safe. I can't do both at once. What do you mean I don't have to keep you safe? My family's gone because of what I know.
Already we see that Frank is declaring the depths of how highly he regards Karen and how deeply he cares for her well-being.
I cannot let that happen. Please.
If that is still somehow too subtle for you to recognize, let's skip ahead to episode 9.
This piece of shit's going after Karen.
What's the deal with you two?
The deal is that nobody goes after her, okay? Not on my watch.
When Lewis calls into the radio interview Karen is doing and threatens her, Frank downright flips his lid. He even likens the depth of his connection to her to the way Lieberman cares for his wife. His wife.
Sarah's my wife. Sarah's my family.
Listen. I don't want to say this once, okay? So's Karen.
This entire exchange between Frank and Lieberman escalates very quickly because Frank is panicking. That's how much he cares. He struggles to simply complete his sentence when he imagines something bad happening to Karen. That is how much he loves her.
If something happens to her, Okay. Please.
Did you notice how even his breath was shaking? Then we move ahead to episode 10, which is one shared bed away from being a full-blown fanfiction. Frank jumps in front of a bullet to save Karen. He says this line.
We're coming for you.
It's a very clever line since Lewis is likely to hear that line and think it's Frank making a threat. But when you see that look in Frank's eyes, there is no doubt that he is talking to Karen, promising that he will save her. There's such a deep level of trust between these two, and the strength of their connection is all the more evident when Frank is trying to talk Lewis down. Karen knows what Frank is actually doing, and this is how they're able to work together to temporarily disarm the device and get Karen free from Lewis's grasp. Then, after the explosion, look at this entirely necessary caressing. Finally, we reach the elevator scene. This is the culmination of all of the escalating tension between Karen and Frank. The depth of their emotional connection is laid out bare. Deborah Ann Woll has said that she and Jon Bernthal played this scene out with more of a romantic context in some of the takes, so I'm choosing to interpret that as them definitely having kissed in at least one of them, but that's purely speculation on my part. For the sake of the show and the story being about Daredevil, I do understand why the writers would not have had Frank Kastle show up. He would have absolutely taken Fisk out with zero hesitation, and Matt would have been left to battle the criminal chaos that would come afterward, which definitely would have derailed the story that they were trying to tell for Matt. A major component of Matt's struggle as a hero is his refusal to kill people. But when Karen realized she needed to go on the run to hide from the wrath of Fisk once she flew too close to the sun, as it were, my reflex was to assume she would call up Frank and lay low in one of his hideouts. You know he definitely would have said yes, if not just skipped ahead and taken Fisk out, as I already stated. While hiding out, she would have tried to figure out her next move. They'd probably hook up while together, or perhaps that's just me projecting from having read one too many fanfictions. As of making this video, I have not seen anything posted about Deborah Ann Woll appearing in season 2 of The Punisher, which seems odd after how much these shows have done to establish their connection. But since Frank and Fisk are still alive, there is still room for them to have a showdown at some point, and hopefully these shows will carry on since they've both done a lot of things very well. But having sorted through so much complimentary feedback, there is one critique about Daredevil Season 3, or just Daredevil in general, that I will now include. The show has a disturbing propensity to seasonally sacrifice people of color, from Ben Urich to Elektra Natchios twice, and most recently, Ray Nadeem. It's downright insulting at this point. I still hope Daredevil gets renewed, but if this pattern is going to continue, then clearly this will be a topic that needs to be revisited. So that's about it for today's video. I would like to thank all of my patrons for the extra support. If you would like to become one of my patrons, I will put the link to my Patreon in the description box. If you would like to follow along with my running commentary on various subjects related to entertainment media, then I would definitely recommend following me on Twitter and Instagram. And by all means, feel free to share your thoughts on Frank Kastle and Karen Page, on Daredevil Season 3, or just any other show or film that you would like for me to talk about in the comments below. But that's it for now, so until next time, this is LadyJenevia, signing off.